we made it through the first week. We're in day 5 of our Romans study. We're going to be in Romans chapter 3 today, and we're going to be in verses 1 through 8. And we'll read that in just a moment. I'm actually going to read from the Message translation because it has a kind of an interesting way. I know a lot of you are listening to it and actually not reading along, and so sometimes it just reads a little bit better. So I'm going to read from the Message translation. It's actually not a translation; it's a paraphrase. Just to be clear on that one, there are paraphrases of the Bible, and this is Eugene Peterson who actually paraphrased the Bible. If we're going to be studying the Bible, we want to read from a translation. Just want to put that out there. But I've titled today's message, Faithfulness over Fairness. Faithfulness over fairness. You know, when I was a kid, my grandfather had this method whenever me or my brother, we're pretty close in age, 3 years apart, would complain about certain things. And one of those things we generally complain about, he'd say, hey, can we have Coke? Oh, yeah. So you get 2 glasses out and he'd put some Coke in each one. And then he'd hand it to both of us. And if I noticed that my brother had more Coke than me, if I said anything, my grandfather would take both cups and then take some of mine and pour it into his. And then I'd be like, whoa, now I have even less. And if I complained again, he would do it again. He's basically trying to break down this cycle of always looking for fairness, right? And I think our society is like that too. We just want everything to be fair. Well, that's not fair. How many times, if you have kids, you hear this all the time. That's not fair. It's like, I don't care what's fair. I care what's right. Life's not fair. It's not always going to be fair. Well, Paul tackles this a little bit, because people start to get a little bit upset with him. Actually perceives that they will get upset with him. And so he cuts the legs out from underneath them, cuts it off at the pass. So we see Romans chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. It says, so what difference does it make who's a Jew and who isn't? Who's been trained in God's ways and who hasn't? As it turns out, it makes a lot of difference, but not the difference that you may assume. First, there's the matter of being put in charge of writing down and caring for God's revelation, these holy scriptures. So what if, in the course of doing that, some of those Jews abandoned their posts? God didn't abandon them. Do you think that their faithlessness cancels out his faithfulness? Not on your life. Depend on it. God keeps his word even when the whole world is lying through its teeth. I like that. Scripture says the same. Your words stand fast and true. Rejection does not faze you. Okay, so like I said, Paul knows that he's going to be stirring the pot here. And so he starts to answer some questions that probably aren't being asked explicitly, but he knows are on their minds right there. And so he gets ahead of them, that, it's like, well, I'm talking about the Gentiles. They don't have to be circumcised. And then you're living your whole life thinking you have to be circumcised. All these, legalism over love over legalism. Where do we go with all this? Like, what does it even matter? What does it mean to be a Jew anymore? And that's not fair. How could God bring in the Gentiles if they haven't done all the things and suffered all the things that we've suffered? And so he knows that's going to happen. But, I love this quote by former President Roosevelt. He says, comparison is the thief of joy. It's so true, isn't it? Comparison is the thief of joy. How many of us are just so happy with our house until we go to somebody else's house that's bigger and nicer? And we're like, oh, wish I had a nice house. Oh, well, you had joy and you were completely content with your house until you saw the other one. How many of us love our car until we drive a newer model? It's like, oh, now we have a comparison and we lose our joy over that. It happens on social media all the time. You tend to look at your social media at your lowest point of the day. When you're tired, bored, whatever, you'll open social media and start scrolling. Excuse me. But when do people post on their social media? They post on social media at their highest points of their day. So you, at your lowest point, are looking at everyone's high points. And of course, that could steal your joy, right? And so don't let comparison steal your joy. We see this in the prodigal son story. So often I'll put myself in the shoes of the prodigal son who comes home and the father throws him a party and he's all excited and it's like, wow, our God brings us home. But then I forget that there's another brother there and he's probably watching this whole thing like, you know what I mean? Like, I was faithful. Why don't I get a party? And he's like, no, my son was dead, but now he's alive. Get it through your head. Like, it's not about just fairness. It's about celebrating this life that has been brought back. I oftentimes forget to put myself in the shoes of the other son, because I'm oftentimes acting like that other son. I see somebody doing really well and I go, God, I've been faithful. That is not fair. How could you be blessing their ministry? How could you be blessing their life? It's like, God's like, dude, just celebrate that this person has come back to me. Paul asks, and then he answers hypothetical questions in this passage to kind of prove a point. He says, but if our wrongdoing only underlines and confirms God's right doing, shouldn't we be condemned for helping out? Since our bad words don't even make a dent in his good words, isn't it wrong for God to back us up against the wall and hold us to our words? These questions come up. The answer to such questions is basically no. In fact, it's a most emphatic no. How else would these things ever get straightened out if God didn't do the straightening? I like that. How could anybody get straightened out if God didn't do straightening? So don't let comparison be a thief of joy. Keep your eyes on your walk. If you're looking over to your right and to your left in the race, you have the danger of tripping over things that are in your way. Don't let comparison be a thief of joy. But also, don't let comparison lead to rebellion, because that can happen too. Another quote from another president: "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit." That was Truman who said that. I think it's great. It's amazing what don't be comparing yourself to others and then coming to this point of rebellion, right? In verse 7-8, it says, it's simply perverse to say, if my lies serve to show off God's truth all the more gloriously, why blame me? I'm doing God a favor. Some people are actually trying to put such words in our mouths, claiming that we go around saying the more evil we do, the more good God does. So let's just do it. That's pure slander. I'm sure you all agree. Sometimes we'll get to this point where it's like, well, I've been living a holy life, or I think I've been, and I'm trying to please God, and yet I don't see God's favor in my life. And then I look around and these other people are not so much doing as well as I'm doing in my walk. And so then it will lead to rebellion. It's like, well, then why even try? If grace abounds, and I'll just do whatever I want because it doesn't matter. That's the dangerous place to be in. Don't compare yourself to others and let it lead to rebellion. It's by the grace of God that you go. Focus on the race that you have before you. But then number 3, don't let comparison lead to complacency. He says the more evil we do, the more good God does. So let's just do it. That's pure slander. I'm sure you all agree. Sometimes we could just become complacent. Like we get to a place of cultural Christianity where it's like, yeah, I got my family, I got my kids, we go to church, everything's fine. But it doesn't really matter how much more holy I get. I mean, can I just rest in this? Can I just don't let comparison lead to complacency. We don't serve or worship God because it's worth it. I've said it before. We worship God because he's worthy of it. Galatians 1:10 says, obviously I'm not trying to win the approval of man. If I was trying to please man, I wouldn't be Christ's servant. We're trying to win the approval of God, not of man. So when you feel like life isn't fair, you got to remember something. God is always faithful. Life's not always going to be fair, but God will always be faithful. Psalm 33:4 says, for the word of the Lord holds true, and we can trust everything he does. And so in our lives, we need to seek faithfulness, not fairness, but faithfulness. Don't let comparison be a thief of joy. Don't let comparison lead to complacency. Don't let comparison lead to rebellion. But keep our eyes on the author and perfecter of our faith. That's what I have for you today. And we will pick right back up on Monday in day 5 of our Roman study. Go to the page there. You can discuss. You can drop a comment below. Love you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.